Over the years, Star Trek has evolved beyond a television program. It is a manifestation of culture. However, The Last Frontier wasn't always easy to navigate behind the scenes. A few performers vanished silently, while some were shoved and others strolled away. Was it conflict over ideas, drama, or something much more intimate? Watch this video with us as we delve deeply into what actually transpired after the cameras stopped rolling and the true reasons why these adored actors left Star Trek. You may be taken aback by who and why. The captain who didn't make the trip. Jeffrey Hunter's reasons for leaving Star Trek. Christopher Pike, played by actor Jeffrey Hunter, was the original captain of the Starship Enterprise before Captain Kirk became a household figure. The Cage, Star Trek's first pilot, which had a more contemplative and philosophical approach to space travel, included Pike's leadership. But NBC rejected the episode because they thought it was too sophisticated. Nevertheless, they recognized potential and granted creator Gene Roddenberry a unique opportunity to revise the series. However, Jeffrey Hunter had already made up his mind at that point. He made the decision not to come back for the revised production. Issues are still up for debate, from schedule conflicts to a lack of desire to commit to a TV show. William Shatner, who later became the now iconic Captain James T. Kirk, was chosen to play the part of Enterprise's captain. That could have been the end of Hunter's departure, but it didn't. During the first season, footage from The Cage was ingeniously repurposed as the production slipped behind schedule. Into the Menagerie, a two-part episode. In addition to saving time, this action established Captain Pike as Kirk's enigmatic forebear in Star Trek mythology. What began as a workaround behind the scenes eventually served as the basis for one of the most interesting legacy characters in the game. Pike would make a significant comeback decades later, this time in Star Trek: Strange New Worlds, portrayed by Anson Mount. Thus, even though Jeffrey Hunter left Star Trek before its official debut, his brief involvement set off a legacy that continues to develop over 50 years later. One crew member departed noisily, while another captain departed gently. However, why continue to watch to find out? The reason behind Denise Crosby's departure, from forgotten to formidable. Denise Crosby made her debut as Lieutenant Tasha Yar in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The security chief of Enterprise D is a formidable and competent individual. However, Crosby felt that something was missing behind the scenes. Tasha's potential was hindered by inadequate screen time and bad scripting, which caused her to regularly fade into the background despite the promising role. Disappointed and underutilized, Crosby took the bold decision to leave the show in its debut season. Gene Roddenberry, the creator, chose to make her departure memorable rather than merely writing her out. In episode 23, Skin of Evil, Tasha was brutally and unexpectedly killed off, shocking viewers and making her departure one of the most talked about scenes of the season. But Denise Crosby's journey through Star Trek didn't end there. Later on, she made a comeback to the show. Not only in alternate universes and memories, but also in a bold new character she helped create. Sela was Crosby's creation. The TNG writing team and Tasha Yar's half-Romulan daughter elaborated on her. Sela evolved into a cunning adversary, giving Crosby the nuanced, vibrant persona she had long yearned for. As Captain Picard's political equivalent, Sela gave Crosby the chance to make a lasting impact on the franchise, proving that she was never really gone even after leaving. What, then, might have caused the next listed performer to depart the show? Let's investigate. Wesley Crusher's departure from the Enterprise and Wil Wheaton's bittersweet farewell. On Star Trek: The Next Generation, Wil Wheaton made his debut as Wesley Crusher, the gifted son of Dr. Beverly Crusher. However, Wesley didn't experience the same love as Gates McFadden, whose absence in Season 2 sparked a fervent fan campaign for her return. Wheaton's Hollywood momentum was halted by his tenure on TNG, despite his prior success in Stand By Me. Wheaton asked to take a break from the series after landing a part in the movie Velmont. However, he was rejected by the production team. For Wesley's plot, he had to insist on the episode he would miss. Believing so, Wheaton turned down the movie, only to find out later that his character had been completely removed from the script. He interpreted it as an insult and an indication that his contributions were not appreciated. Eventually, this backstage conflict forced Wheaton to leave the following generation in pursuit of more satisfying jobs. However, that was not the end of his story. Later, Wesley Crusher made a comeback, portraying himself as a confused Starfleet cadet before joining the enigmatic Travelers, a suitably unconventional trajectory for one of the most contentious characters in Star Trek. Despite leaving the main cast, Wheaton's connection to the franchise remains strong. He is still a well-liked voice in the Trek community and hosts The Ready Room, the official aftershow for contemporary Star Trek shows. His experience serves as a reminder that quitting Star Trek doesn't always imply permanent departure. Then what? Watch The Space to discover out. Daring departure. Why Deep Space Nine was rejected by Michelle Forbes. Michelle Forbes had a big influence on Star Trek. Ensign Ro Laren, a fierce and multifaceted Bajoran officer who made his debut in Season 5, represents the next generation. The Cardassian occupation of Bajorans, a major plot point in the Star Trek universe, was made possible by her character. Producers had huge ideas for Ro, anticipating she would be the Bajoran's second in command aboard the space station, and that plot would become essential to the following Star Trek series, Deep Space Nine. Forbes, however, had other plans. She declined the chance to work with Deep Space Nine in favor of a career in movies. According to reports, her choice strained her relationship with the TNG cast and almost prevented her character from being given a respectable send-off. Fortunately, circumstances and scheduling conflicts came into play. Due to the show's episode backlog in Season 7, a previously shelved screenplay was given new life. Ro Laren chose to go against Starfleet and join the Maquis, and that episode, Preemptive Strike, gave her a beautiful farewell. It was one of the most iconic character deaths in Star Trek history and a bold and moving conclusion to her story. Forbes had a prosperous television career, starring in True Blood, Battlestar Galactica, and 24, despite missing out on DS9. Despite her short time in Starfleet, Forbes' performance and Ro Laren's influence had a long-lasting effect on the franchise. Why did another walk away when she rejected fate? To find out, keep watching. The Curtain, Terry Farrell's exit from Star Trek, and the reason behind his departure from Deep Space Nine. It wasn't necessary for Deep Space Nine to be one of the franchise's most heartbreaking farewells. Fan favorite Jadzia Dax, whose combination of strength and wisdom helped define DS9's identity, was portrayed by Farrell. However, the story was much more intricate behind the scenes. Farrell requested a smaller role in the show's final season when her contract was up for renewal following Season 6 because she was feeling the strain of the rigorous shooting schedule. She claims that rather than reaching a settlement, she encountered opposition, especially from Paramount executives and producer Rick Berman. Farrell stated in subsequent interviews and the documentary What We Left Behind that she was coerced into agreeing to a full-time return, and finally decided to leave after her request was turned down. Although Berman has denied any misconduct, the consequences were evident. Unaware of the talks, showrunner Ira Steven Behr was left feeling irate and upset when he was forced to kill Jadzia Dax. The irony? The same Paramount officials who refused to let Farrell on Star Trek also gave her a major role in the sitcom Becker after she left DS9. Jadzia's legacy as one of DS9's most adored characters is still celebrated by fans despite the resentment surrounding her departure. Furthermore, Farrell's tale serves as a sobering reminder of how the outcomes of on-screen heroes can be influenced by off-screen conflicts. One actress chose to leave. Was the following one ejected? Let's investigate. The disappearance of the Doctor. The reason behind Gates McFadden's abrupt dismissal. When Dr. Beverly Crusher left Star Trek, The Next Generation, after just one season, fans were taken aback. As Wesley Crusher's mother in particular, Gates McFadden anchored the show's emotional core with warmth and intelligence. Both characters were left stranded by her abrupt departure, though, and many people thought it odd that she was gone while her son was still on the Enterprise. There were rumors that McFadden and the show's producers, especially Maurice Hurley, who was TNG's head writer at the time, were at odds. Years later, McFadden talked openly about that challenging time in an interview with Michael Rosenbaum. "I think I probably ticked him off," she said candidly when asked if her relationship with Hurley had anything to do with her leaving. She criticized the early iterations of the show for their outdated portrayal of women. She voiced her displeasure with the portrayal of her character's relationship with Wesley. Kept asking, "Why did I raise this brilliant child?" Yet only the male characters speak to him whenever something occurs, even if it's something severe. She works as a scientist. I don't believe this. Both cast members and fans were taken aback by McFadden's sudden departure. Additionally, Diana Muldaur, who played Dr. Pulaski in her place, had a difficult time right away. Thankfully, McFadden recovered thanks to the crowd support. She made a comeback in season 3 and remained with the show for its entire run, even making appearances in Star Trek, Picard and the TNG movies. It wasn't merely a casting choice that led to her reappearance. Fans enthusiastically embraced the course modification. When one doctor disappeared, another took over. However, why so short? Watch this space to discover out. A temporary physician. The reason behind Diana Muldaur's brief tenure on TNG. The producers of Star Trek did not recast Dr. Beverly Crusher after Gates McFadden was unexpectedly removed from the next generation of the show following season 1. They completely replaced her. Here comes Diana Muldaur, a well-known character in the Trek world who starred in Gene Roddenberry's telefilm Planet Earth and made appearances in the original series. She was recruited by Roddenberry himself to play Dr. Catherine Pulaski in season 2. But even with her skill and background, the changeover wasn't easy. Rumor has it that Muldaur wasn't exactly embraced by the close-knit group of people who were still devoted to McFadden. The sick bay was directly given an old-fashioned life by her persona, Pulaski. However, some viewers were irritated by her cold and contemptuous attitude towards Data. Fans accustomed to Crusher's compassion were turned off by the change, even though Pulaski was intended to be a different kind of doctor, less affable and more straightforward. The specifics of Muldaur's departure after only one season are still unknown. Later, at the beginning of TNG's 3rd season, she brought up a scheduling clash with a McCloud reunion telefilm. Additionally, her time with the show was ended by that point. As Roddenberry's influence on TNG diminished, what had started out as a favor for him became less important. Muldaur didn't turn around. She went on to play a significant part in L.A. In the television series Law, she portrayed Rosalind Shays, a character that had one of the most memorable exits ever. Even though her tenure on TNG was short, it was just one more chapter in a career that included many daring roles and unexpected twists. What actually transpired with Voyager, from abrupt farewell to abrupt hello? To find out, keep watching. The sudden departure of Genevieve Buzzhold from Voyager, the captain who wasn't. The brief and surprising tenure of Genevieve Buzzhold as Star Trek's first captain. One of the most fascinating casting tales in the franchise is Voyager. The role of Captain Nicole Janeway in this series was first chosen for Buzzhold, a well-respected movie actress with a reputation for emotional depth. However, it was evident after a few days of filming the pilot that she was not a good match for the part or the show. The demands of Star Trek and her artistic approach were at odds from the beginning. Buchhold's desire to portray Janeway as an intellectual scientist rather than a dominant Starfleet leader ran against the demands of the part. Furthermore, she was overwhelmed by the speed of TV production. The lengthy workdays, rapid turnaround times, and intricate technical discussions proved to be very beneficial. Buchhold left the set before the first week of filming was over, informing the filmmakers she just wasn't cut out for the role. Although her unannounced departure delayed Voyager's debut, it ended up being a blessing. Kate Mulgrew, who had tried out for the part before, was the first person the producers looked to. Mulgrew took over and transformed the role, now known as Catherine Janeway, with his commanding presence and grounded delivery. She later rose to prominence as one of Star Trek's most recognizable captains. Even for a seasoned actor, not every work is a good fit, as Buchhold's exit serves as a rare reminder. Her story highlights how distinctive and challenging the Star Trek universe can be, especially when spearheading the push into the ultimate frontier. Who was Perseus Komata, from one lost star to another? Let's investigate. This bald beauty was neglected by Hollywood. This is the brief Star Trek adventure of Perseus Komata. In the tumultuous 1970s, Paramount made several attempts to bring Star Trek back to life. A planned new series called Star Trek II, which fans now refer to as Phase 2, was one of the more promising attempts. Everyone signed on, with the exception of Leonard Nimoy, as it was intended to get the original cast together for a new TV adventure. Producers created the rational Lieutenant Zahn, the fervent Commander Decker, and the enigmatic navigator Lieutenant Ilya, a Deltan with empathic abilities and acute mathematical knowledge, to fill the Spock-shaped void. One of the main characters in the series was to be Ilya. To give the role life, producers cast Persis Khambatta, a former Femina Miss India. She was considered in the writing of several episodes. Among them was The Child, which would subsequently be adapted by Star Trek: The Following Generation. However, the studio terminated the network and the series before any filming could begin. Still determined to turn their efforts into something, Paramount turned the 2-hour pilot into the movie picture Star Trek. Asin remained on the sidelines as Nimoy made a comeback as Spock. The two new characters, Ilya and Decker, were essentially limited to supporting roles in the plot and were finally sacrificed to the enigmatic V'ger in a metaphysical turn of events that kept Kirk, Spock, and McCoy in the spotlight. Although Persis Khambatta's tenure with the franchise was short, it had a significant impact. Persis Khambatta's biography of Cheryl and Connolly claims that the actress was unfazed by the encounter. Filming had been exhausting, and her ability was overshadowed by Hollywood's obsession with her shaved head. Her audacious portrayal of Ilya, one of the first attempts in the franchise to have a really alien female lead, made an impression even if she did not return to Star Trek. What broke Grace, going from a brief moment in the spotlight to a silent farewell? To find out, keep watching. Grace Lee Whitney's agonizing trek, the silent departure of Janice Rand. Grace Lee Whitney's fate as Yeoman Janice Rand was predetermined even before Star Trek's September 1966 premiere. After only a few episodes, her character, a composed and competent assistant to Captain Kirk, was subtly written off the show. Whitney disclosed that her departure was much more than just a creative choice in her brave memoir, The Longest Trek: My Tour of the Galaxy. She revealed that someone she only named as the executive had sexually attacked her at the Desilu Studios. Whitney thought she was fired because her attacker would have been reminded of her presence all the time. However, the official explanation was financial. Whitney, one of the top-paid supporting players, was being evaluated for termination or contract renegotiation owing to insufficient screen time, according to a casting document from late August 1966, just weeks before her assault. Later on, Gene Roddenberry said he deeply regretted removing Rand from the series. In fact, he suggested that Whitney return in a cameo role less than 2 months after her termination. However, Rand disappeared from Star Trek's initial 5-year objective, and that plan never came to pass. Rand returned years later in a subdued yet significant manner. Whitney played the role again in the movie Star Trek and had cameos in films 3, 4, and 6. Additionally, she made a farewell appearance in the Voyager episode Flashback, which paid tribute to the actress and the role. Grace Lee Whitney died in 2015. She had long since reconciled with the difficult parts of her life. She had achieved closure, she once told this author over lunch in 2012. A somber, respectful conclusion to a tale that merited better, a grace note, if you will. There was silence as her story came to a close. What prevented this next actor from coming back? Let's investigate why Kirstie Alley didn't reprise her role as Saavik. Saavik, played by Kirstie Alley, was a notable character in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, and many people anticipated her return for the follow-up. However, Captain Kirk himself stated that money was the only factor that determined that choice. William Shatner recalls that Paramount turned down Ali's offer in his autobiography, Star Trek Movie Memories. The offer from Paramount was quite modest. It wasn't as much as what they gave me for Star Trek. I therefore assumed that they had no interest in me portraying the role. Ali gave Shatner an explanation. It seemed like a clear message. They didn't value her enough to keep her. Nimoy Leonard, who directed and acted in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, supported that. Nimoy informed Shatner that we just could not afford her. For a novice, she had received a respectable salary for Star Trek II, and I believe the studio was willing to pay her more than twice that for 3. However, it was still insufficient. In Star Trek 3 and 4, Robin Curtis played Saavik in Ali's place. Curtis's performance was deemed solid by Shatner. in a fairly unappreciated capacity. Fans, however, never quite forgot Ali's portrayal of the cool, collected Vulcan officer. It's ironic that Ali would eventually take Shelley Lone's position on Cheers after the actress quit the popular program to focus on her acting career. Although it was essentially another passing of the torch, Star Trek fans were left wondering what would have happened if Saavik had continued. One exit caused a stir. Did fans get even greater surprises from the following one? Watch this space to discover out. Jennifer Lyon's departure from Star Trek, why? Voyager. Star Trek lost Jennifer Lien. Kes is a key and promising character, but Voyager ends after 3 seasons. Following the popularity of the subsequent generation, Voyager's 1995 debut helped attract a new generation of admirers. They were forced to travel home for 7 years in a daring change from previous shows. Lien portrayed Kes, a young Ocampa who had a brief life expectancy, strong telepathic abilities, and a brief romantic relationship with Neelix. Kes had a lot of plot potential and was unique, but the character never truly clicked with viewers. Like Wesley Crusher before her, Kes was the quintessential young, intelligent crew member, but without the same degree of hostility from the audience. Was not one of the more adored characters, though, and the authors were finally caught off guard by this lack of popularity. After an encounter with Species 8472, Kes's developing psychic powers go haywire in the 4th season episode, The Gift. Kes chooses to leave Voyager after realizing she poses a threat to the people she has grown to love, changing into a pure energy entity and escaping into the galaxy. Her final fate is unclear, but it was a heartfelt farewell. But storyline restrictions weren't the only reason she left. Behind the scenes, Lyon left for a number of reasons. Despite Lyon's skill, showrunners Rick Berman and Jerry Taylor later acknowledged that the Neelix-Keyes romance was a mistake and that the writers had reached a creative dead end. It became more challenging to include Kes in subsequent arcs because of the Ocampa's short 9-year tenure, which limited their long-term story potential. Nevertheless, both cast members and fans gave Leanne's performance high praise. Many others thought that her exit also created room for Jerry Ryan's character, 7 of 9, to debut, which drastically altered the show and raised its ratings. Even though Kes lacked the stamina of other Star Trek characters, her exit is nonetheless remembered as one of the show's sadder moments, serving as a reminder that even promising plot points might be lost if the creative stars do not align. One of these performers had no choice, even though the majority had the opportunity to leave or be fired. Why? Let's investigate. The untimely demise of Anton Yelchin during his prime. Yelchin, Anton. In June 2016, the talented actor who gave Pavel Chekhov a youthful charm and vitality in the rebooted Star Trek movies passed away suddenly and tragically. When Yelchin was just 27 years old, he passed away in a strange accident at his Los Angeles residence, shocking Hollywood and the Star Trek community. Early in the morning, the accident took place. Yelchin was out of his car. When it abruptly rolled backward down his steep driveway, it was a 2015 Jeep Grand Cherokee. He was fatally injured when the car pushed him against a security gate and a masonry post box pillar. Concerned friends visited the young actor's house after he failed to show up for a planned rehearsal and found the devastating find. The LAPD categorized it as a sad accident, but the coroner determined that blunt traumatic asphyxia was the cause of death. When Yelchin passed away, he had recently completed filming Star Trek Beyond, the 3rd installment of the rebooted movie series. His interpretation of Chekhov, popularized by Walter Koenig, received high appreciation for its wit, warmth, and wisdom. The director of Star Trek Beyond, Justin Lin, said, "I'm still in shock. Rest in peace, Anton. Everyone who had the pleasure of knowing you will always remember your zeal and drive." Accolades from co-stars and co-workers flooded in. J.J. The announcement that the Jeep model involved in the accident had been under investigation for its controversial electronic shifter, which had led to numerous driver complaints about confusion over whether the vehicle was actually in park, caused even more heartbreak. Abrams, who directed Yelchin in the first 2 Star Trek reboots, wrote, John Cho, who played Sulu, wrote, even William Shatner, the original Captain Kirk, took to social media to express sorrow over the loss of such a talented young man. Even though Yelchin's case did not have a formal link, the tragedy caused public outrage and increased investigation of the vehicle's design. That sentiment was echoed across the entertainment industry and among fans, many of whom had watched him grow from a promising child actor into a star on the rise, said Jodie Foster, who had directed Yelchin in the 2011 film The Beaver. There was more to Anton Yelchin's premature passing than the loss of a gifted performer. It was the silence of a bright, inquisitive soul with almost boundless possibilities. A sobering reminder of what Chekhov brought to Star Trek and what the world lost all too soon is provided by his portrayal of the man. How, therefore, did Star Trek's legacy continue? Watch this space to discover out. Star Trek's legacy. There is more to Star Trek than just a TV show. It is a phenomenon that has bravely spread beyond its origins in the 1960s. Gene Roddenberry started the company with just one series, but it has since expanded to become one of the most well-known and lucrative media conglomerates in history. It has influenced generations of fans and is now present in video games, comic books, literature, television, movies, and even language. And having an impact on popular culture and science fiction. On September 6, 1966, Canada's CTV network debuted the first Star Trek series. 2 days later, NBC followed suit. The episode, which was set in the 23rd century, chronicled the journey of the USS Enterprise as it encountered new life and civilizations and found strange new worlds. Roddenberry drew inspiration from the maritime exploits of C.S. Horatio Hornblower by Forrester, Gulliver's Travels' social satire, Forbidden Planet's futuristic outlook, and the format of TV westerns like Wagon Train. His design functioned as a platform for intellectual contemplation of human nature as well as a space adventure. Despite being cancelled after just 3 seasons, Star Trek remained relevant. The original cast was reunited for its revival as an animated series and 6 feature films. The Next Generation, a television revival that was set a century after the original, then took off in the late 1980s. Several new television shows, including Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise, were born during that time. In addition to 4 full-length motion pictures about